Okay, hello everyone. Welcome. I hope you're enjoying your week. First, let me say a little words about our sponsor, the Collab Lab. The Collab Lab is run by volunteers. We help early developers to gain practical experience by working with a team of engineers. I believe our next cohort starts in August, so if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to me or go to our websites. Okay, now I'm super excited to welcome back Bekah. Bekah, this is our second time with us. I highly recommend her first tech talk where she shared her stories, how she got into tech, why she got into tech. For those of who don't know Bekah, I'm gonna try to pronounce your full name. Okay, let me know how I did. Bekah Horit Weigel?
Very close. Harat Weigel.
Horit
So yeah,
Weigel. Okay,
Weigel. Harat's always the hard one.
I tried. Thank you so much. After teaching college English for 10 years, Becca transitioned into tech when her youngest of four was about a year old. Since then, she started the virtualcoffee.io community and currently works at OpenSauced as the developer experience lead. Awesome. Welcome back, Becca. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today and to be able to share with you. There's some familiar faces in the audience, so it's great to see you all here today. So I am going to be talking about open source 101, but I've got a little bit of a different spin. I'll take questions at the end. I'll try and check the chat, but sometimes I find that takes me off in a tangent. So I may not check that chat as frequently as you may want me to. Actually, now I can't even see the chat now that I'm sharing my slides. So I have a little bit of a spin on open source 101. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I think the essential skills are for open source contributors and how to get started. And I think that actually answers part of the question that I had in the chat, because if you can develop these skills, if you can understand these things, it's going to make it much more likely that you'll be able to contribute, that you'll have a pull request merged in and approved and merged in. So I think that, when we think about open source, we often think about code, we think about projects on GitHub or GitLab, and these projects that developers work together. But we often kind of underappreciate all of the skills that it takes to run a successful open source project. And a lot of those skills aren't technical skills. They're what I like to call core skills. You need good core skills to be a good contributor. So we're going to talk about that today. Before we talk about practical application, we're going to talk a little bit more about open source as well. These are some of the things that we're going to be talking about. You can see a good portion of the things that I have on during this talk are part of these core skills. That doesn't mean that we're only going to talk about those things. We're going to talk about them in the context of open source. And then we're going to go through getting started, and I'm going to walk you through some resources. We're going to talk about the process, and we're going to apply some of the things that we've learned. So why am I here today talking to you about open source? Well, as Yufa said, I am the developer experience lead at OpenSauced. And the thing about open source that I love is that we're all collaborating together, that it's open to anybody that wants to contribute. And for me, I am a mom of four, and I think that everything that you learn about having a family can be applied to open source. I do run the Virtual Coffee IO community with a bunch of other great folks, some of whom are here today. And that gives you a lot of insight into how to run an open source project. Not only do we have open source projects at Virtual Coffee, but the community is based on open source tenets and pillars itself to help us create a space where everyone can contribute and grow together. And as the developer experience lead at OpenSauce, I spent a lot of time creating content, guides, educational information, and listening to contributors of our open source projects themselves. So, and beyond this, my background is actually in teaching college English, which I think has actually prepared me for being in tech, being part of the open source community, because you have to think about how to communicate with each other, how to collaborate, how to talk to different audiences, and how to make sure that you're conveying the material in the clearest way. Okay, so what is open source? This is an intro to open source talk. So I think it's important to have a little bit of information about what it means to be open source. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of history and go into more details. But in the 1950s and 1960s, software was shared freely with hardware. And that's how developers collaborated with each other. But by the 1970s and 80s, commercialization changed things, and it led to restricted access of different projects and software. And then we started to see this divide of proprietary software and open source software. So this is where the birth of free software kind of comes in. In 1985, Richard Stallman founded the Free Software Foundation, which is also known as FSF, to promote software that users can run freely. They can study it, they can share it, they can change it, they can work together on that. And their GNU project actually aimed to create a free operating system, but lacked a free kernel. So you may have heard of Linux, and this is where Linux comes in. In 1991, Linus Torvalds developed the Linux kernel, and this completed the free GNU operating system. And this is kind of a pivotal moment in time because this popularized open source software. And the next big moment in the open source movement came in 1998 when Christine Peterson coined the term open source software. And this led to the creation of the Open Source Initiative to promote it, which is known as OSI, and it's still an organization that is active today. So that through those efforts and the efforts of many other people, we started to see widespread adoption of open source software with many major companies supporting open source projects. So we're going to fast forward a little bit today. And what we know about open source software, this is just kind of mind-blowing in my opinion, is that 90% of companies use open source software. So that means pretty much all of us are touching something that uses open source software every single day. And so much of open source software is done by volunteers, by people who are doing it in addition to full-time jobs. And so that creates this really unique environment where you're able to collaborate with other people doing lots of different and interesting things. So what does open source mean? Well, this means that the source code is available to the public. So you can go to a repository on GitHub, you can check it out, you can look at it, and you can likely contribute to it. I want to have like a little asterisk here and say that there are projects that are open. The code is there, but they're not accepting contributors. That happens sometimes, and I've talked to a lot of folks recently who have said, I've tried to contribute to this project, but they're not taking contributors. So sometimes the code is open, but they don't necessarily want to take contributors. We'll talk a little bit more about how to identify that later. So with open source software, this is in contrast to proprietary software, which is software where you can't see the source code, you can't change it, you can't modify it. So the core principle behind open source software is the idea of collaboration and the belief that when we do these things together, we can share knowledge, we can learn and grow together, and we can create more innovative software. So contributors to projects can come from lots of different backgrounds. And the nice thing about open source software is also that you are working in an asynchronous environment. So that means that when you're contributing to it, whether that's through creating an issue, writing a discussion post, or creating a pull request, you can contribute to it from anywhere in the world and at any time. When we open this up to everyone, then we really are able to grow and to see much bigger changes in the open source ecosystem and in tech itself. And one of the great things about open source software is the transparency. So you're working and you're communicating in the open. And this is why it's very, very important to have good core skills. So before we jump into them specifically, I want to take a minute to talk about the benefits of practicing good core skills when you contribute to open source. So when you do this, you're able to enhance collaboration and project cohesion. This means that you're communicating clearly, you're able to talk through the things that you're working on, and you're able to see the larger vision for the project. It also can help to create a supportive and inclusive community. So when you practice these good core skills, it should bring you into the community with other people. It should allow you the opportunity to create relationships and deepen those bonds with those people. It also helps to create a diverse space because, like I said before, you can be anyone, anywhere, and in many cases at any stage of your learning journey and be able to contribute in some way. It also allows us to develop high quality software because we get to work with so many different people who have different backgrounds and experiences and depths of knowledge that we might not have. It also helps to create a sustainable open source ecosystem and reduce contributor burnout. This is one of the big challenges in open source, contributor and maintainer burnout. But when we practice good core skills, it definitely helps to reduce that. So how does this all start? Well, I like to think that it starts with a little bit of proactive engagement. Okay, so this might seem a little odd and like, what does proactive engagement even mean? But when we talk about proactive engagement, it means that you're looking at an open source project that you might want to contribute to, and you need to think about other people and their time. So we empower ourselves by learning first and asking questions second. We should be respecting the work that others have done before us to create an experience that can support the most number of people. All right, okay, what does that mean? Well, there are ways to approach an open source project. Most of them have set up guidelines and directions for you. So before you jump in and say, like, where should I contribute? How do I take on this issue? You should have read the README. You should have read the contributing guidelines, and you should have read the code of conduct. So those three things are documentation that's set up to empower you to be able to contribute to that project. So when you're looking for a project to contribute to, again, go through the README, the code of conduct, and the contributing guidelines. Then if you have a question, you can ask that question, but don't think of those as optional reading because they're not. Those are required reading for contributors. And the second thing I want to say about that is don't just skim it. I know that you get really excited. I want to contribute so badly. And you just want to jump right in, especially if you know it's a small fix and like famous last words, I can do this in 5 minutes. I've said that many times and it almost never gets done in 5 minutes. Invest the time into understanding the project and the guidelines there. It will save you and the maintainers a lot of time and effort. Okay, so you can think of the README as the syllabus or the map of the repository. It lets you know what you need to look for and how to get started with the project. After you've gotten started, you'll likely need to know how to contribute to the project. And this is usually what you find in the contributing.md file. Sometimes they'll have it linked in the project, in the repository. Other times they'll link it on the README back to their documentation. So I think we do it both ways at OpenSauced, and either way is totally valid. It will also help to set the expectations, how to communicate, and how to support the project. And sometimes it gives you very specific directions. So like, for instance, in OpenSauced, we have a special command that if somebody wants to be assigned an issue, you can write .take in the comments, and then they're automatically assigned that issue. So a lot of times we'll get asked like, hey, can I take on this issue? And then it makes it clear that the person has not read the contributing guidelines. And then we direct them to the contributing guidelines. It would be great to have you work on this. go through the contributing guidelines and learn how to assign yourself in the process that we use to work through external contributors. So make sure that you read that. And lastly, you have that code of conduct there. It's good to read to know how to communicate with other people, especially since we're working in different cultures, across different cultures. Having an understanding of how we treat each other, how we talk to each other and communicate becomes really essential to be a continual contributor for a project. So one more way that you can work on being proactively engaged before contributing is making sure that you're not repeating a task that somebody else has done. So for example, if you find a bug in an open source project, don't run to Discord or Slack or wherever the open source project lives, the community lives. But the first thing that you need to do is know, should I add a discussion here? Should I create an issue? Before you even do that, you should look and see if somebody else has already created that issue. I know that can be a little tricky, especially if you're looking at a project that has maybe 100 or more open issues. How do I track this down? How do I find this? GitHub search function is pretty decent if you look for keywords and you filter by the type of issue you're looking for. So for example, if there is a bug on a particular feature, you might filter by all of the bug issues and then write something about that specific feature and search that way. So always leverage that power of filtering as you try and search through those things. And I think now is a good time to start about the next core skill because you're going to need it if you start writing issues. So it's really important to be empathetic as a contributor. We're all humans behind open source. We often don't see the other person's face because we're not all on the same team. And sometimes it can be a challenge to remember that we're human and to maintain that empathy. So what does empathy look like in open source? Well, number one, be kind in your interactions. Number two, be patient with your responses. So for example, some maintainers might not work on the weekends. So don't DM them or send them a message on Twitter or in a different space to ask to have your PR reviewed. Believe it or not, maintainers also take vacations, so they might be off for a while. So be patient with that. Most open source projects, maintainers get notified when you submit a PR. So you don't even have to let them know. They know, they have already received a notification that your pull request is there. It's okay, they'll get to it when they have time. Now, if you haven't heard in maybe 7 to 10 days, it's okay to comment on the pull request or the issue and say, have you had a chance to look on this or look at this? Or do you have any feedback for me? But again, take that time, be kind, be patient. It's really great to also mentor other people who are contributing. So this doesn't have to be a one-on-one mentorship, but it could be providing empathetic guidance to a new contributor. I think it's a really great way to contribute to open source by supporting other contributors. So maybe you answer their questions. Maybe you give them feedback on their code. Maybe you notice that they said, hey, can I take this issue? And you know that there's a .take command and that's in the contributing guidelines. And so you share the link to the contributing guidelines and say, this project has special guidelines for being assigned an issue. Take a look right here. That is a really great way to help create a supportive environment in open source. It's also really great to celebrate other people's contributions. It feels really good when somebody is recognizing you, and maintainers try to do that frequently, but it's great when your fellow contributors do that as well. So another great way to contribute to open source and to help create a welcoming and safe space is to recognize other people. It's also important to handle conflict sensitively. There are often disagreements in open source. It could be between contributors, it could be between yourself and the maintainer or someone else. It happens. Again, we're often working across cultures, across time zones with different levels of understanding. So it's important to be empathetic in those conflicts and try your best to understand other people's perspectives. So don't come to the conversation with the mindset that you are right and the other person is wrong. Think about how can I put myself in their position and understand what they're talking about so we can come to some kind of conclusion together. Because when we prioritize empathy, it becomes much easier for us to bring positivity to our communication, which is key to a healthy open source environment. So how are we communicating? So I was recently talking to a job seeker about open source. And they said they really wanted to work on an issue in an open source repository. But when they tried to get the project up and running, the directions weren't clear enough to get it running. And so they quit. That's valid. It's valid to quit and not work through it. But I said, this is a perfect opportunity to be a contributor to open source. You have tried to do something, you have followed the directions, and the directions aren't clear enough. So what can you do? Well, you can create an issue. If you're confused about something, the chances are that somebody else is also confused about that thing. So it's an opportunity to demonstrate good communication skills by sharing that in an issue. So when you create an issue, what should you do? Well, you should be concise. Maintainers have not that much time to spare, so you want to get to the point of your question or your feedback and provide necessary details. As part of that, you should be specific. What are the things that you've tried? Where have you run into the problem? Is there a particular piece of code that you're stuck on? Are you getting an error message? Screenshot that error message. The more information the maintainer has to be able to provide a response, the better. But again, it's that tricky line of providing enough information and not providing too much information that it takes them a half an hour to read through your issue. This is why doing things like providing a screenshot or a screen recording can be super useful in effectively writing an issue. If you are creating an issue, you'll find that many repositories have issue templates. Love issue templates, saves me so much time. What doesn't save me time is when people ignore filling out all of the different parts of the issue template. Fill out all of those pieces. It helps the maintainer to understand what the issue is, why it's important, and also whether or not to prioritize that issue. If you just have a one-line description and that's it, that issue is probably not going to get prioritized. It's the same thing with pull requests. Many repositories have pull request templates. It looks different than an issue. And actually, IU is here and wrote a really good blog post on this. IU, I don't know if you can grab that and throw that in the chat, but it would be very useful for everyone to read through the difference between PR templates and issue forms. A lot of great information there. And so again, fill out all of the fields in the pull request template. It helps the maintainers to figure out what you're doing, what your approach has been, why you've done it, and to be able to merge in your pull request more quickly. So going back a little bit to that question that was in the chat at the beginning, how do I get my pull request merged in? Following those directions, communicating clearly, and filling out pull request templates are huge. Another part of that is linking to an issue. So not every repository requires you to be working to have an issue open to submit a pull request, but many of them do. So if you create a pull request and it's not linked to an issue, some projects will automatically just close your pull request. So we'll walk through what it looks like to link to an issue here in just a little bit, but keep that in mind. Make sure that your pull request is linked to an issue. Let's see. I think we can, so yeah, just a reminder that you can contribute and you can showcase your skills in other ways too by triaging issues. So one of the big ones I find is somebody will create a bug report, or like yesterday, we were shipping in an update to something, and I noticed that the graph was kind of, when I was filtering, it was coming outside of the screen. And so I created a video, I put that in the issue, and I said, hey, can somebody else share, test this and see if they can reproduce it? I've been able to reproduce it a couple times, but it's useful if other people can reproduce the issue as well. So a lot of times reproducing an issue can be really helpful. or saying like, I can't reproduce this on Chrome, but I can reproduce it on Safari. So then we know, okay, this is just a Safari issue, and that helps us to approach the problem a little bit more quickly. The beauty of open source, again, sorry, is there are just so many different ways that you can contribute. So I want to emphasize that it's important not to limit yourself to what's tracked on green squares on GitHub. You can provide feedback, you can support each other, you can write about the project, you can share the project with other people. All of these are great ways to develop your network in open source. So chances are, if you're contributing to open source, you're going to be giving and receiving feedback, and good communication is really important there, but active listening is also super important. So if, I just need a drink. If you know about active listening, you know it means that you take the time to listen to what someone is saying with your full attention. So that means you try and avoid distractions, biases, your own pride. I know like all of these things can impact the way that we perceive what other people are saying. Most of the feedback that you're going to receive in open source is asynchronous. So that can be good and bad. On one hand, because it's written out, we can always go back to it. On the other hand, if we have questions, it might take a long time to communicate those questions or to receive a response. That's a key part of open source that you have to understand. So no one owes you their time, and maintainers are doing their best to get back to you within a timely manner. So again, let's be patient. But the more you listen, the better contributor you'll be, because the more you listen, the more you're going to understand about the project, the maintainers, how they communicate, and how you can implement their feedback. So when you receive feedback, keep an open mind. Approach it like a learning experience, ask questions for clarification as you need it. So if you're new to contributing, I want you to know that it is totally okay to get feedback on a pull request. In fact, nearly everybody gets feedback on a pull request before it's merged in, unless I merge my own pull request myself, which sometimes I do, and is a bad practice. So I don't recommend doing that, but sometimes I don't get feedback, and I probably should. But it's normal to get feedback, and active feedback in this situation means active listening in this situation means that you read and you understand what the maintainer or the pull request reviewer is saying about your pull request. So if you don't understand, definitely ask questions. You can also Google it. You can ask ChatGPT about it, or if you need clarification, or if you're not sure what something means. But sometimes when you ask questions, you'll find that you get to understand the maintainer's thought process about something, and they'll be able to understand your thought process because maybe you've discovered something that they haven't considered. It's worth noting, though, that maintainers have way more information about the project than we do as contributors. So sometimes what might seem like the best answer, in your opinion, is not the best for the project based on the things that the maintainers know in the background. That's okay. What's important is you're willing to listen to feedback from the maintainer. So again, feedback is an opportunity to improve and to grow. And giving and receiving feedback creates a culture of continuous learning and collaboration. And that's absolutely essential for a healthy open source ecosystem. So when you receive this feedback, remember, try and understand what the maintainer is asking. Ask questions if you don't understand, and resolve the feedback by implementing the suggestions or asking questions. You'll never resolve feedback if you haven't done those things. So again, before you ask for a pull request review, if you've already received feedback, make sure you've implemented that. And I know one of the biggest mistakes I see contributors making is not taking the time to fully understand that feedback and thinking about the changes. And again, this goes back to the idea of like, oh, this is going to be a quick fix. The maintainer said, I needed to change this thing right here. So I change it in one place. But maybe I've done that same thing 5 times in my pull request. That means that you need to change it 5 times. Okay. So really be thoughtful about the way you approach your understanding the feedback. All right, so I think we are ready for a walkthrough. I'm gonna stop sharing just for 1 second so I can make sure that I am sharing the right things. I want to share my whole screen. Okay. Okay, this should work. So right now you should see the open source education path with OpenSauced. Do you see that? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
Yep.
All right, cool. So at OpenSauced, we have this education path, and we have an intro to open source course. IU has done a ton of work on this and has helped create this course and one of our other courses as well. So big shout out to her. But I think it's important to note that if you want more details, if you want more in-depth history and understanding of open source and the process, this can be a really great way to get involved and to understand that. So it's just intro.opensauced.pizza. You can go there and find this course. If you haven't contributed to open source before, there is a chapter here that will walk you through how to contribute and get you your first contribution. If you are going through that chapter and you find, I don't understand what's happening, what should you do? Who knows? Write an issue. You're right. Thanks for sharing. Definitely write an issue. We want all of the feedback. If you think something can be clear, please send us that feedback. So as another part of this experience, we're going to look at the Pizzaverse repository. Can you see the Pizzaverse repository now? Yes, thanks. Okay, so this is, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the things that I talked about here. So this is a repository on GitHub. And we want to look at a couple of different things here. So first of all, you want to make sure that a repository is active before you contribute to it. And so here we see that there were 117 commits yesterday. Look, there's IU. Somebody is maintaining this project. So that's a good indication. Also, we have these labels here, so it's beginner friendly. So if you're new to open source and you're trying to find the right place to get started, you know that this is a good place for you. Here you can also find the code of conduct. We talked about the README. So when you scroll down in a repository, you can see the README here. This is the README. It tells you about the project, tells you about the structure, and it tells you how to contribute. And we have this important note here about some of the issues. Okay, so all of these things, again, required reading. And then this tells you how to run the project. Fork, clone, create a new branch. All right, we'll walk through that a little bit. I think I'll have time to do that. One of the things that we found in some of the projects that we run is merge conflicts happen quite frequently. Merge conflicts might be scary, but don't be scared. We have directions for how to deal with merge conflicts. And actually, I would say learning how to deal with merge conflicts is a big part of the developer experience. You will run into merge conflicts, and you need to get more comfortable with being able to resolve those. So these are, I don't like any merge conflicts. They make my heart beat really fast, and I just want to like run away and never come back. But in terms of being complicated, on the scale of difficulty, these are on the less difficult scale of resolving merge conflicts. It's not to say that it's not challenging. I don't want to take away from that. I'm not going to say it's easy because it can be hard, but I just want to say stick with it. Talks a little bit about keeping your branch up to date. So what does that mean? That means when you're not going to create a pull request directly to this project. You have to fork it to your own GitHub account. That means you're making a copy. And so my GitHub username is Bekah HW. So it would be Bekah HW /Pizzaverse. Rather than here, we have OpenSauced /Pizzaverse. So this would be my copy of the Pizzaverse repository. And then I create a branch. So that means that I am taking that copy and I am creating a separate space. It's kind of like a safe copy that I can merge in once I know that everything is working properly. Sometimes if we make updates to this main repository, the OpenSauced Pizzaverse repository, that means that your branch is now out of date. So you'll have to update it before it can get merged into the repository, especially if there are conflicts there. So don't be scared of all of that. It's okay. There are directions to help you learn how to do that. And again, this is one of those things that you'll learn how to do as you grow. Let's see. And then we have these contribution guidelines. So it gives you a little bit more of how to approach the project and how we do things. So like we have a special commit utility called conventional commits, which helps you write your commits in a specific way. And it gives you other information there. So that's kind of an overview of how to look at an open source project. Now we're going to go ahead and look at issues. So in this top tab, and you write an issue for things like a bug, a feature, a change that you think needs to be made to the repository. So as you can see here, this repository is full of good first issues. And this means it's good for somebody who is a beginner. What I would like to say here, because this is important, a good first issue is not a good second issue. So if you've already done it once, don't try and do a good first issue twice because it's not a good second issue. So we're gonna look at this. We're gonna create a new issue so I can show you what an issue template looks like or issue form. So a bug report, that means there's a problem with something. It needs to be fixed. There's a feature request. I have an idea. I think this would be a really cool addition to your project. Security vulnerability. That's, there might be something wrong with security in this situation. I don't think it really applies to the way we have this repository set up, or ask a question. And I think this actually takes you to our discussions, which we have set up. Not everybody has discussions open, but we do. So we are going to look at what it looks like to create a bug report. Okay, so okay, it's letting me know there have been some changes. So first of all, you want to create a title, like fix broken image link. So your title should be pretty descriptive, but short. So fix broken image link is probably okay, but you might want to say for Ohio Valley Pizza. Now I know there's a Ohio Valley Pizza in there because I submitted it. So this is specific enough that the maintainer can go and look at that thing. You would describe the bug here, and this is a really great place for a screenshot. This is also useful to give more information about where you're seeing the broken link. So for example, I think this was probably a GitHub bug, but I know a while back, I could click markdown links. I think it was on desktop, but if I clicked it on mobile, it didn't work. So this is another way, again, to provide information. So I might say like on iOS, I can't see the image of Ohio Valley Pizza. And then I would put in a screenshot there and then provide any other necessary details. And then you can also say like, okay, go to this link, look in this particular place, see the error. So here I can't submit the issue because I don't have any directions. Go to the place. We're just gonna, why can't I submit the issue? Boom. I guess it was just a little laggy. Okay, so now you can see this issue and the maintainer will come in here and they'll check this out and see whether or not this is valid, which it is not. So I will close it. Here's a pull request. So right now, this is a good one to take a look at. So one of the things that you can do is add a pull request or a fact about pizza. So we have a description here. This PR adds a pizza fact. All right, we know what's going on. They have checked the PR template, which I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Related tickets and documents. So this is a thing that I was talking about before. Include your issue. So this is a link to the specific issue that this person is working on. Now, in this case, that's an issue that stays open all the time. But if your pull request close that issue, like if the issue is fixed by your pull request, you can use keywords to automatically close that. So you would say fixes number 36 or closes number 36. So GitHub has some like nice magic behind the scenes that makes it easier for maintainers. And here we have an optional, which GIF best describes the PR and how it makes you feel. Sometimes it's just fun to add a little pizzazz to your pull request. So IU provided feedback. One of those things where we say, hey, it's important to listen to the feedback from the maintainers. And IU does a really good job of always providing clear feedback. And also she's made it easy for this contributor to make the fixes. So she's done it in a way where all they have to do is click commit suggestion. And I know when IU reviews my PRs, I always appreciate that. It's often in like documentation. I'm like, yes, commit. Thank you. And then she can resolve that conversation. So the other thing here is we see here, the branch has conflicts that must be resolved. So those are the merge conflicts that we talked about. Once those merge conflicts are resolved, then this pull request is good to go and it will be merged in. I'm going to show you how to create, I'm going to show you what a pull request template is, and then I'm going to make sure that we have time for questions. So I'll go ahead and stop. What am I doing? Oh, I don't think I can do it. Show you there. Pull request template. So this is what it looks like when somebody submits a pull request, but this is the screen that you'll see when you are creating that pull request. So I know that this can seem a little overwhelming. So it's important to really walk through and see these steps. So description, this stuff, you won't see it when it's in preview mode. See, you just see description, but it's important. Please do not leave this blank. What type of PR this is. And so you have to put a little X in there, related tickets and documents. You would do like closes, number, whatever, or related to, and then answer the rest of that. So I thought that it was important to show you what a pull request template looks like, because I do know that a lot of new contributors get a little confused about how to fill those out, what the expectations are, and every project, again, is different. So there might be some projects where you have nothing in your pull request template, or they may not even have a pull request template. But it's best to follow the practices of that particular project. That's why, once again, read the README, the contributing guide, make sure that you know how to run the project before you go through and ask any questions. So I guess, wait a minute. One last thing that I did want to show you. So I talked about forking and cloning repositories. This is where you can find that. So you would fork it here. GitHub makes it nice. You just have to click a button, create fork. It should only take a few seconds. There it is. So now you can see it's Bekah HW, my copy of the Pizzaverse, and it even lets you know it's forked from the OpenSauced Pizzaverse repository. So they provide a little bit of information. Now, the nice thing is too, so that says this branch is up to date right now. If we merge something in, we'll need to sync that fork. This is so handy. If you have contributed to open source like 3 years ago, they did not have this sync fork. And this has just like blown my mind, because it makes my life so much easier to be able to sync the fork. Although I did discover recently that if you are really out of sync, sometimes they don't give you that option. So I know someone that was like 3 years out of sync, and GitHub was like, no, we don't do that here. So if you forked something 3 years ago, it might not be available to you. It's probably better just to refork and clone. So that is what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to stop sharing now. I can reshare if you have questions about specific things, but I did want to make sure I got to any questions that folks had.
Any questions? I know the first one's usually. Feel free to type it out too if you, I know some of you can't really talk right now.
Emilio.
Yeah, hi. Hi. So yeah, I just wanted to ask, what open source projects would you recommend for um, early career developers? Myself, like I participated in the Collab Lab in the most recent cohort this spring.
Awesome.
And thank you. And yeah, so this talk was super informative. It gives me like I'm much more knowledgeable than I was before. Um, but I'm just wondering if there are any open source projects that you would personally suggest for someone who is at this level in their career.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, I have a list somewhere, so I'm trying to find it. I thought I had it open. Um, Oh, okay. It's because I have a total of 7 pages and I was looking at one. Okay, so the first thing that I want to say is that my boss, B. Dougie, wrote a blog post called Good First Issues Don't Exist. And the whole point of the post is that the best issue to work on first is the one that you've written yourself. So I would say, there are a couple of different ways to find projects that are good to work on. The first is there something that you're interested in? Is there a technology that you use all the time? Have you run into a problem with that technology? Is there some sort of product that you use? So I know, for example, there's a product that I use for blogging. It's open source. And I ran into some issues with unclear documentation. So that became an easy way for me to contribute. I was pretty familiar with the product, and I can say, like, okay, hey, here's the issue. This is what I think the solution should be. I think I've contributed to GitHub documentation as well in the same way. I found something it was out of date screenshots or something like that. And so I was able to write that there. Now, you can do it that way, but I know when I was getting started in open source, it was like, I don't really use that many tools. Like, I use VS Code. I don't know what else I should be contributing to, and that seems like really scary. The other way to find good issues to work on is to talk to people in the community. Like, where are you contributing to? Where have you found a good experience? Everybody I know who's contributed to the Astro projects have had a great experience. I had a great experience contributing to their documentation. I'm working on a joint blog post with somebody from Appright, and we're walking through like the different pieces of contributing and how important it is to also understand the community and how the community interacts with each other. So another way might be look at some open source projects that you're interested in, join their communities, and kind of you can actively engage, or you can lurk around and just see what they're all about and what they're talking about. That's totally fine. So joining those communities might help you feel like, okay, this is a really great place for me to contribute to. The other thing I would say, so OpenSauced, we have a lot of opportunities. Anybody is welcome to contribute to OpenSauced, and I'm happy to walk you through what that process looks like. There are beginner repos there. The other thing I would say is also think about what your end goal is. Do you want to be a repeat contributor? I will say, as a maintainer, we love repeat contributors. There's also less barrier to entry for you. So if you are, it takes time to contribute to a project, right? And one of the biggest, I don't know, I can't think of the word right now, but new contributors are often like, oh, it just takes so much time. It's exhausting to get started. Well, if you're contributing to 5 different repositories, it is definitely going to be exhausting. But if you're contributing to the same one over and over, then it becomes way less exhausting. You don't have to read the README again. You don't have to read the contributing guidelines again. You know how to run the project. So that's important. I would say, like, try and find something that works for you, but also if you can't find, it's fine to, you know, contribute around. It can also be useful to think about, like, when you're thinking about what your goals are for that, do you want to enhance your resume? If you do want to enhance your resume, then what part of your resume needs enhanced? Do you need to be working with React hooks or something? And if you need to be working with React hooks, who has issues open for React hooks, or whose site is using that? Maybe you want to find a job using Next.js, then don't contribute to a repository that's using Python, right? So there's like lots of different ways to think about it and approach it. And I know that's not an easy answer. There's not a clear answer there, but you know, unfortunately, there's just a lot of factors that go into it to try and figure out, like, okay, where should I be contributing?
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm happy to answer follow-up questions as well. I'm still trying to find that list I have.
Phil, this can be another tech talk just by itself. Cool. We have a few shout out to you, Becca. I think people are feeling like you're making this process less intimidating. Um,
Oh, I
and one
see Sahil has another question. Do you
question.
mind if I answer that?
Yep.
Um, so Sahil says, are code contributions usually too advanced for those in early stages? And I would say they're definitely not, but it depends on how you're defining early stage. So it's also important to be, again, mindful of the maintainers, but also maintainers are not the only ones that are going to be answering your questions. If you have a community, ask the community. If you're in their Discord or whatever, ask the Discord. That's totally fine and valid. But I know for us, we try and always have some good first issues. And those good first issues really are walking people through exactly the steps that they need to complete that issue. And I think that's why that label is so important to have. So you might be searching for projects that have good first issues, and that's a good way to start as well. And I know another label that we've started using is beginner friendly. So that's like the step after a good first issue. Good first issue really handholds and walks you through everything you need to do most of the time, or provides you with every single resource. Beginner friendly might be like, we're going to send you in the right direction, but you have to come up with the solution. So that's another great way to, I think, kind of approach contributing. But I definitely, there are issues for CSS. There are issues for HTML. You know, it just depends on the project that you're looking at. Oh yeah, I forgot to show you my last slide with my contact information. Sorry about that. You can always email me. I'm Bekah at OpenSauced, SAUCED.pizza. I am at Bekah HW on Twitter, and I am Bekah Arat Weigel. I think that's what it looks like on LinkedIn. Yeah, so feel free, send me questions. Oh, you can also join the OpenSauced Discord and DM me there. I'm also Bekah HW. Okay, that's our Discord. So if you want to ask questions there, you can find me there as well.
I'll compile other resources, by the way, and send it to all of you. I know there are a lot of great resources.
Yeah, any other questions? I maybe hopefully answer them all. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and thanks so much for having me. This is fantastic.
Cool. Yeah, it's definitely a journey. So if you have any questions, follow-up questions, let us know.
Yeah, and you know, it's normal to feel overwhelmed when you're doing something new and to feel like it's hard. But the more you do it, the better it gets, and you meet some really great people. And there's a question on Twitter the other day that said, maintain, I think it was for maintainers, like what is the best thing about open source? And for me, it's about being able to work with people that I wouldn't have the opportunity to otherwise. It's
Mm.
great to be able to work with contributors and to have support. Like IU is not a paid OpenSauced employee, but she just absolutely keeps all of the things going. And I'm very grateful to be able to work with her in that way.
Cool. Just a lot of shout out to you, Becca.
Thanks.
Yes, we upload all the recordings on our website, the Collab Lab website, as well as we upload them to YouTube channel. So I'll send those to you as well.
Yeah, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. OpenSauce has all different kinds of issues. It just depends on what's available right now. But I know that on the intro course and Pizzaverse and the docs site, there are usually markdown issues. So you still go through the process of forking and cloning and creating a pull request, but there's not usually code involved.
Cool. Think we're at the time. Thank you everyone to be here. Thank you, Becca. Thank you so much. This is really informative and hopefully help you all to feel less stressed. Um, thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll see you at the next Tech Talk.